So I just want to take a minute and just sit here and enjoy being with you all. I was up here a few weeks ago when Jim Rosemergy was here, and what a treat. So just a reminder of the love that's in this place. And when Reverend Steve called me a few nights ago to ask if I would be willing to do the service today, that he couldn't be here. I've been taught to always say yes. And so I said yes. And it would be a privilege to go and be there with your community. And I know it's a time of great change with Barbara making her transition so unexpectedly. And these changes that happen sometimes so unexpectedly, we can feel like we're ambushed, can't we? That, I wasn't expecting this. This wasn't the way it was supposed to be. And yet life has these cycles, doesn't it, of opening and closing on this form and always something new. I wanted to play another song for you. Besides prayer, music opens my heart. Does it open yours? It just goes underneath words somehow and opens me even more. And this is a song, it's because I was thinking of Barbara when Steve told me that I'd be coming to do this. I was thinking about her letting go. And this song was written for me when I was leaving my church up in Maine. And it's called, It's Always Hard to Say Goodbye. And, whether it's a congregation we're leaving or whether it's a relationship that has ended, it's all letting go of something that was once very treasured to us. And the process of letting go, it is a process that we have to surrender into. And so I just thought perhaps this song would open your hearts even more to that letting go process that your beloved friend has gone on her next soul's journey. It's a God call, isn't it? When we go to that other side, we never know when it's going to be. It could be expected from a long illness or come like Barbara's did. But my belief is it's always a God call for something else. And that doesn't necessarily make it any easier, but I think it's what it is. So let me... Okay. So picture your beloved friend. Or if you didn't know her, if you're that one person that's new here today, picture someone else that you've had to say goodbye to, that you never wanted to say goodbye to, but it just happened. And hear these words and let your heart open to it.
It's always hard to say goodbye. It's always hard
That's the truth of our human journey, isn't it? Or my experience, anyways. As I was driving over the mountain today to be with you all, I love fall. Isn't it just the most exquisite season? And it's a season of letting go, isn't it? Because I was watching the leaves come down in these beautiful, graceful, elegant dance, with the wind and the light coming through, which is always shining. But I don't know about you, but in my human letting go, it's not so elegant and graceful always. And I do resist it because it's not what I want. And I'm learning to resist it less because it makes life a whole lot easier, doesn't it? Resistance to what is causes our pain. And so when I try to deny what's happened, I make that letting go take a lot longer. And there's some other little ways that I sabotage myself with the letting go. See if they speak to you at all. In some instances, I make somebody else wrong. They've done something wrong. And so it's much easier to focus on what was done wrong out here than to look at my own fear and anger and feel those feelings about what's happened. That is the way through any of the letting go, isn't it? We have to feel our feelings. And I can be the queen of not doing that. So I'm not preaching to all of you that's something I don't need to hear. When my father died, and he was my rock. He was my person that was there for me. He was the person that I knew I was lovable. And he's really the only person, at least that's how I felt, that I got that from. And so when he died, I didn't let myself grieve for 4 or 5 years. I couldn't because it was too hard to feel those feelings because my story around it was, well, now nobody's going to know who I am, that I'm a good person, that I'm a light. Nobody else is going to bring that love. So it was that fear of lack that I'd been raised with, that there wasn't enough love in this universe to go through all of our experiences and all of our lives. And so once I finally was able to grieve my father's passing, I started to open up. My heart started to open from that closed place I'd been holding it, and to realize that there's love all around, isn't there? If we're willing to open our heart to it, if we're willing to open our heart to it when we don't want to. And so the question that I asked myself a lot while I was sitting with these ideas was, am I willing to be in the mystery of God even when I don't like it? Am I willing to say that yes, to trust, to be willing that something is wanting to come through, some new form of life? For Barbara, it was new life on the other side for her soul's journey. Unexpected, but that God call. But we all have things here while we're still on this plane, don't we? That as we can let go of them, even though we don't want to, something new, something good, something God, something life, something love can happen, right? And man, I think of the places that I have not allowed that to happen for such a long time because of the story that I was telling myself of the way it should be, the way it had to be, the way it was right to be. I had to make something out here wrong. This is the way it needs to be. And I've done a lot of that. I think I'll tell you one more. We've all got stories, so think about what some of yours are about where you've let go, and have you afterwards gone back to them and found the silver lining that you couldn't see in the moment that it happened? Because we see this much, don't we? And there's this much out there of God expressing that we may have no awareness of, but can we keep saying yes and not making something wrong, not making God wrong. It's pretty arrogant, right? I'll tell you one of my places of arrogance. My son in Florida, some of you have heard me talk about him before, and he struggles with addiction. And he and his lady were living on the street. Have I told you this before? I forget my favorite stories when I'm with family, and I tell them again. They were on the street, and she got pregnant. And I was ripshit beside myself. Because the next part of the story was they were going to keep that baby. And I thought, how can you do this? You don't have any support. You're on the street. How are you going to support this little child that's coming onto this planet? This can't be. And I remember being on my knees in the sanctuary up in Maine, and I was so angry at God. How can you let this happen to a little being to come in? And so there was my story from this point of view. So they had the little girl, my granddaughter Kylie, and she turned both of their lives around. She was their angel sent from God to help them find another way of life. Has everything gone smoothly since then? No. But that little girl came here with her sole purpose. And if I had stopped it or said, this can't be, they're all stories. We just make them up. And so finally I was able to let that go and say, thank you, God, for this little being that you got onto this planet to love these two other beings and her Gammy and all those in her circle of life with this wonderful little energy. I remember when she was 4 or 5, I was living down there with them, and she would learn new words. And she learned the word amazing. And so she would come around all the day and go, Gammy, isn't that just amazing? Isn't that just amazing? That's reveling, isn't it? And how can we remember to have that kind of energy? Yes, to have the feelings that of the pain and the loss, but then to revel with the knowing that love is underneath all of this, that God is underneath all of this, that all change is God calls even when we don't like what it is. And it's so much easier to preach about it than do it. It takes a lot of courage to keep our hearts open, doesn't it? And I looked up the word courage, and the Latin for cur is heart knowing. So to be able to keep that open heart to that mystery when we don't understand something that's happened out here that we can't see, it takes a lot of courage and willingness. And so I just honor each of our journeys, our heroes, our sheroes' journeys of being in that kind of a place as much as we know how to do, as much as our consciousness will allow us to do. As much as our consciousness will allow us not to make something out here or someone out here wrong and the villain and put them out of our heart of love and compassion. Jesus taught us that, didn't he? Our way shower taught us that. He didn't put anything outside of his heart of compassion. It says we can do all things that he did. That's a tough one sometimes, though, isn't it? But that's the journey, to love how we show up, trusting that we're always doing the best we can, even when it doesn't look like it, even when it doesn't feel like it. Can we keep our hearts open to the flow of this opening and closing, this being in the flow with God, with all the new that is being brought? I thought of the Buddhists and their sand mandalas. And they're so gorgeous, aren't they? And they take hours of work to create. And then when they're done, what do? They just wipe them all away. There's no attachment to that form. There's the knowing that there's more of that love coming through underneath always to bring us new form of love if we stay open. And to not beat ourselves up when we close a little bit, because we got to bring that love to ourselves also, don't we? And when I was thinking of Jesus and the modeling that he did of all of this, I love that scripture where it says, come to me, all of you who your hearts are heavy and burdened, for my yoke is easy. For my yoke is easy. I call this braving. Can we be brave enough to trust that yoke of love that the Christ has there for us, seated within every cell of our being as we choose to open to it? So those places where I'm not letting go, I want to focus on that a little bit, because if any of that comes up for you, don't you want to live this other way? Who is it hurting to be holding on to some of that pain and not be willing to let it go? Who's it hurting? It's not hurting anybody else. It's hurting us. And it's making us bound to that other person like a steel binding. We have to let it go. And to let it go, I have to let go of wanting to be right. Do any of you know that one? Oh, gosh. And I used to joke, the phrase, do you want to be right or do you want to be happy? And I used to always joke, I want both. And I do. But in order to have the happy and to be in that flow, I have to be willing to let go of being right. And knowing that everyone does the best they can in all these challenges and opportunities and relationships and things that we do in life. We have to be willing to let go of wanting to be right, of knowing we are right, for God's sake, if we want to be at peace with what has happened in our lives. If whatever is needing to be let go of, we have to let go of needing to be right. And then the next thing is we have to accept what's happened. And I don't want to do that sometimes. How about you? And when I don't accept it, I just hold the angst with me. It's happened. It's happened. But by not accepting it, I just keep beating myself up with the feelings of what's gone wrong or what I've lost, or I could be beating myself up. Sometimes it's me that I think did something wrong. That's no good either, is it? And then I have to forgive. I have to forgive myself. I have to forgive that other person and know that it's all self-forgiveness about what thoughts am I willing to carry? Am I willing to go back and let Jesus truly be my way shower of love and forgiveness and compassion when I don't want to? Or am I going to hold on to what I think is right? And so that practicing of forgiveness is huge in this journey of letting go, especially of letting go into this mystery when we can't understand what's happened and we don't want it to have been that. And then to focus on what you do want. And don't we all just want more love, more acceptance, more peace for our life? How can people give it to me if I'm not willing to extend it to you in those places that I don't want to? How can that be? And then for me, this process, I have to do it over and over and over again. Because it doesn't happen with one forgiveness, does it? But it begins the process with willingness. And we just don't know that big picture, you all. We just don't know it. One of my favorite stories is Little Soul in the Sun. It's a children's story. Are any of you familiar with it? It's about these two little souls up in heaven. And one is getting ready to incarnate. And he's so excited. And he's having this conversation with God. And he's saying, and God is asking him, well, who do you want to be down there? And he said, what do you mean, who do I want to be? I want to be the light. I am the light. Well, how do you want that light to express? And he says, I want to be forgiveness. And God says, ooh, that's a big one. That's a big, bright, shiny light, because in order to be forgiveness, somebody has to do something to you that doesn't look the way you want it, that doesn't feel good, that feels like an ouch, that could feel like a betrayal. Jesus had some of those, right? And so the little soul said, ooh, that sounds a little scary. Who would do that? And then this other little soul comes over to him, who's his best friend, just his best friend. He says, I'll do that for you. And he says, really? Yes. I'll come and do something horrible. I'll forget who I am so that you can be who you came here to be, which is forgiveness. And I only ask one thing of you. And the little soul says, oh, tell me. I'll do anything you ask of me if you're doing this for me. And he says, when I forget who I am, you have to remember for me. So when someone acts out in a situation that's about letting go and change, what's our one thing that we're supposed to do, that we're called to do, is to remind that person that they're loved and they just forgot temporarily. I love that story. We're either, Course in Miracles says, we're either extending love or we're asking for love. And isn't that the truth with forgiveness? We're either remembering to extend it and praying that people remember to extend it to us when we forget. It's always this give and take of love and remembering to do it. Especially in that mystery where things show up that we don't like. So I want to read you a poem that speaks to all of this really quite clearly. It's called Let It Go. And I'm sitting here thinking, but I don't like this. So there's the resistance. Maybe I'm the most resistant person here in this room. Maybe that's why I'm up here being the one saying all of this. You know, to really get in, we have to live these teachings. We have to be willing to practice them when we don't want to. Let go of all the ways you thought life would unfold. Anybody have one of those happening right now? Let go of the ways you thought life would unfold. The holding of plans or dreams or expectations. Let it all go. Save your strength to swim with the tide. The choice to fight what is here before you now will only result in struggle and fear and desperate attempts to flee from the very energy you long for. Let go. Let go into that flow of love. Let it all go and flow with the grace that washes through your days, whether you receive it gently or with all your quills raised to defend against perceived invaders. Take this on faith The mind may never find the explanations that it seeks, but you will move forward nonetheless. Let go, and the wave's crest will carry you to unknown shores, beyond your wildest dreams and imaginings. Let it all go and find the place of rest and peace and certain transformation. You willing to do that? You willing to let go of dreams and expectations and how you think it should go, to be in that flow of love of spirit? Well, I'm going to read you a letter that's going to test your letting go right now. Test your willingness to stay open-hearted and in love. But know that this letter comes on the wings of love and is being shared from the wings of love, with a prayer from the heart that it can be received in that way as well. This is from Reverend Steve. He said, "Dear ones, after a great deal of prayer, I have been led to step down from my position as your part-time minister." Deep breath, you all. It came from a place of prayer. It came from a place of God. Recent events in my life have shown me that it is time to relax more and focus additional energy and quality time on my family and retirement in general. My preference would be to relay this to you directly, but that was not feasible for me today. I am most grateful for Reverend Jesse's willingness to be here on short notice and to speak and to be conveying this news to you today. This is especially difficult, I know, to come at a time when our church is grieving the loss of Barb Scott and all she means to each of us who knew her. I am working closely with our board to make this change as gentle and peaceful as possible. Your continued support for them and Unity of Blairsville will be even more meaningful now. The church, as you and the board have heard me say, is guided by the Holy Spirit and blessed with the presence of our beloved way-shower, Jesus. As we all continue to practice his teachings of love, acceptance, and forgiveness, the spiritual roots of each of us and this church will only grow deeper. That's true, as we can hold our hearts open. In the Gospel of Matthew, we read, "All things are possible." As we focus on what is going right in this church, as you look around the sanctuary and see the love that is so evident here, I believe you will see that so much good lies ahead for this beloved community. Mary and I have been richly blessed to have been with you in this capacity over these last 8 months. And we look forward to a time in the not too distant future when we can join you on a Sunday and have some closure, a few laughs, and maybe a few tears too. In the meantime, please know that we love and appreciate each of you and hold you close in our hearts. You are welcome to call or email me if you would find that helpful. The board has that information. In closing, I encourage you to feel. First step in letting go. Encourage you to feel, free of judgment, whatever might be coming up for you. In the Father's love, Reverend Steve. So my guess is this is a hard place right here to be in. And my thought to begin helping us move through this if you're willing. I'll play a song about letting go, and we'll do a little bit of silence because all new creation comes from that place of silence, doesn't it? And then if you'd like to and if you're willing, we'll create a circle with the chairs. And we'll have a circle. It'll be a prayer circle. It'll be a circle where if you have something that's bubbling up in you, a feeling that needs to be expressed from an I standpoint, it's the beginning place to let go of those feelings if you'd like to be part of that circle. Circles are always, I think of them of wombs of creation. I had talked to Reverend Steve last Thursday, and we were having our women's group down at my house, and he asked us to hold a prayer for Barbara. And so this beautiful circle of wise women, we held a prayer circle, just blessing her on her journey, whether she came back or whether, it was transition to the other side. We knew that prayer would guide that journey of hers to her next soul's resting place. So these circles, there's power in circle. So my prayer is that as many of you as are willing will help form a circle afterwards, and we'll join together in love. So I'll play a song to move us into this time, and it's called Let Go of the Shore. And Barbara has done that complete letting go, hasn't she? We're being asked to let go of something here, perhaps, that we are very attached to, and yet we're still here in this sanctuary, hopefully opening our hearts for blessing to all and knowing that new love and new creation is always possible. Are we willing to trust the great mystery of God even when we don't want to?
Let go of the shore and let the water carry you. Let go of the shore, float into the mystery, float into the mystery, float into the mystery.
So as we begin to allow ourselves to sink and float into that mystery, that allness of God, that allness of love, that allness of life, I want you to hear at least the beginning of the Fillmore invocation. Charles Fillmore, one of Unity's co-founders. I am now in the presence of pure being and immersed in the Holy Spirit of life, love, and wisdom. I acknowledge thy presence and thy power, O blessed Spirit. In thy divine wisdom, now erase my mortal limitations, and from thy pure substance of love, bring into manifestation my world according to thy perfect law. In the silence of our being. And then as we begin to bring our awareness back to this room, we bring this consciousness of love and compassion. We bring our braving heart, willing to stay open. And for those that wish, we gather in circle to have a time in community of sharing and love. And if that doesn't call to your heart, there are goodies out in the kitchen. They'll be there after the circle, too. So if you're going to stay, if you'd help me bring the chairs into a circle, that would be great. Thank you.